It's cowardly to think I have something more than a bowdlerized conception of myself to offer the world and those closest to me. I'm giving you something that probably doesn't interest you, but I know you will look at it because you love me. I insist, like the ham I am. The barest way I can describe the contract as it plays itself out in my years. Art has taken precedence. I've fallen deeply into it and can barely return to life. Hey everybody, thank you for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today we're talking about Greg Gerke's collection of essays. This is the latest book from Zerogram Press, the same publisher that brought us Novel Explosives, that brought us My Back Pages, Jen Craig's Panthers in the Museum of Fire, and now Greg Gerke's collection of essays, See What I See. Reading essays for leisure or for pleasure, meaning not in school, being forced to by a teacher, was something that came very late in my life. It really sort of formed out of grad school, and when I was forced to read through selections in the anthology The Critical Tradition and Literary Theory and so on, I started to, especially with essays that were written in a more personal mode, just like the genesis of essays with Montaigne. I have been reading and savoring Montaigne for a long time. His collection of essays stays right by my bedside. At the same time, to write an essay is a very difficult task. You would think that it's easy, and when you read one that's written well, it inspires you to do it yourself, because a lot of what you're trying to do is take something that's very important to you and convey and transfer its importance to someone else. Now, one of the first books of essays that I ever bought was E.B. White. I got this at a tiny little farmhouse turned bookstore in Meadows of Dan, Virginia, just off the Blue Ridge Parkway. Sadly, they have gone online only and closed down the little house, which is it's very sentimental, because we used to go to a cabin up there every fall and visit the bookstore there in Meadows of Dan. And the upper room to the right is like a little loft, and they had it crammed with literature, with literary fiction. And I remember that I couldn't even stand up in that room. So I literally had to go up there and crawl around on the floor looking at the spines. But in the foreword to his essay collection, E.B. White says, "The essayist is a self-liberated man or woman, sustained by the childish belief that everything he thinks about, everything that happens to him, is of general interest. He is a fellow who thoroughly enjoys his work, just as people who take bird walks enjoy theirs. Each new excursion of the essayist, each new attempt, differs from the last and takes him into new country. This delights him. But will it delight others?" And when I have tried to sit down and convey something that I'm very passionate about in an essay form, what usually happens is I just fail utterly, or it becomes too cloying or maudlin. Thankfully, although Greg Gerke is taking on social issues and social ideas of our day, our technology-fueled time, and blending them into a passion for an older time through literature, through his personal life, and through film, he thankfully and somehow has figured out how to do this while staying away from the one pitfall of, like I said, becoming too cloying, too childish, too sickly sweet. And on the other hand, being just, a curmudgeon. He is in the line that stems from his obvious sources of inspiration, William H. Gass, of whom I would say that Greg Gerke is a disciple. In his dedication, he refers to Gass as the master, just as Gass would refer to Henry James as the master. But also Walter Pater, John Ruskin, Lionel Trilling, Geoffrey Hill, Henry James, Guy Davenport. These are the people that have provided a foundation for Gerke. And he's standing atop those giants' shoulders and now helping us to see even farther than they did. And it begs a good question because as we have, Harold Bloom is gone, Umberto Eco is gone, William Gass is gone, Susan Sontag is gone. So who is this new generation of essayists who are going to continue to develop the form? We still have people like Michael Dirda and Marilyn Robinson, but there is a new generation that needs to begin to assert themselves. And Greg Gerke is part of them. Another person I would say is a part of this upcoming generation is also Emilee Prado. And I'll put her information as well as Greg Gerke's below in the description box. But Emilee, she seems to be sort of a globetrotter, writing from all over the world. Interestingly, she has affinities with Gerke in that she has studied both writing and film. And she has some essays that you can check out from her website below. I don't think she has a collection published yet. But it's exciting to begin to get in touch with the new generation of essayists. This book boasts a foreword by Stephen Moore, who really does a good job talking about how this is a splendid return to the personal in the essay, as he refers to it. And he talks about how Gerke really helps draw us into the everyday or quotidian human who is at the heart of all of us. I mean, all of us are everyday people who are readers and appreciators of film. We're not all academics who are cloistered in an ivory tower and, achieve tenure and take sabbaticals to go and focus on research and all this. Like Stephen Moore points out, Gerke and people like us, we're reading books on the subway, in the bathroom, wherever we can find snatches of time. The collection is split into 3 categories: the writing life, which has 21 essays, real life, which has 4 essays, and the silver screen, which has 12 essays. Now, I decided to start with this by going into the real life section and reading the very, very short essay on eating combos, as in that little weird cylindrical cheese-filled snack. I've actually never eaten combos before. This is a really good toe dip into Gerke's voice and into kind of the way he thinks. It was a good way to start. And then I read all the ones about writing and literature. Then I went to film. Then I went back and read the other 3 of real life. And I have to say right here at the start that surprisingly, I really took to the 12 essays on the silver screen. They really were well done. And Gerke, he started out, he's a Midwesterner. He's from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Started off a filmmaker shooting films on 16 millimeter. And it's obvious that he has amassed a deep and wide breadth of information on filmmakers and the history of filmmaking. But then he decided to turn to literature, and he got a degree in literature. And there's this one moment in one of his essays where he talks about how he was high up, elevated in a meadow in Arizona. And that's when he pressed the declaration into his journal that he would not be a filmmaker, but rather a writer. And so now we're seeing the fruits of that. In one of his essays, he talks about how he is not a page turner. He is a page hugger. I love that. He doesn't want to just burn through books. He wants to enjoy and taste and savor sentences. I'm very thankful that he introduced me to Geoffrey Hill. I will be getting my hands on his critical works. Also, the essays of Louise Gluck. There's an essay in here where Gerke talks about his love for Gluck's poetry. And this is something that I've just discovered for myself this year, coincidentally. I started to read Gluck right after it was announced that she won a Nobel Prize. I got her omnibus collection, and I have just fallen hard for Gluck's poetry. And if anybody is on the fence about Gluck or wondering about it, his essay will definitely push you to check it out. There's incredibly insightful criticism on Henry James, especially on his novel, A Portrait of a Lady. There's great insight into the work of William Gaddis. a terrific essay or book review on Alexander Theroux's An Adultery. But then we turn to film. And in Bergman's Spell, he says, that is cinema's plainest advantage, as film can bring one closer to a live face than any other art form can. And so, right at the outset, just about in the film section, he starts to give us reasons why film can triumph over other forms of art. Now, I went through a huge Criterion Collection phase not too long ago, and it lasted for a while, but then it started to peter out because I basically started prioritizing reading, and I sort of give all of myself to reading these days. I rarely watch movies and shows, but Gerke really reawakened that love for classic cinema and great auteurs. I too fell for Ingmar Bergman, the Swedish auteur, long ago. The very first movie of his I saw was Persona, and then I saw Through a Glass Darkly, then Wild Strawberries, then The Virgin Spring, and then Fanny and Alexander, which now I watch every year at Christmas time. I have the Criterion set of that with the whole 5.5 hour long version of it, and I love it. I've also read Bergman's books, Images, and then The Magic Lantern. It's obvious that Gerke also has that affinity for the gloomy Swede. He really caused me to want to watch some movies such as Eric Rohme's Moral Tales of Rohme. I've only ever read A Tale of Springtime, which I loved. Antonioni, Blow Up. I have heard about this film for so long, and somehow I've watched other Antonioni films, not that one. But then The Woman Under the Influence by John Cassavetes, I had never even heard of that somehow. And Kubrick's Barry Lyndon. And fun fact, Greg has been at work on a full-length book called Kubrickology. And it hasn't seen the light of day yet, but I really hope it will, because after reading his incredible essay on Barry Lyndon, it has completely opened my eyes to different ways of looking at film, and especially what Kubrick accomplished in his lifetime. This book contains a treasury of quotes and anecdotes from writers and filmmakers and criticism. It also has some great tenets that we should live by if we're going to go out and criticize a work of art, such as critics carry the stain of envy into the thoughts they print, especially those, meaning those critics, emboldened enough to critique without having ever made the art that can exasperate them. If you were ever, even if you were just on Goodreads, writing reviews, put that on an index card and keep it on the wall above your writing desk. But he also, at the same time as offering this great criticism and personal ties to these works of art, he also gives us a lot of just conventional and personal wisdom, such as, I would bet all the money in the world that in the final analysis, the personal outweighs the historical or political in almost every instance. The most mundane and seemingly least important things are our benchmarks for how we think about things. While licks of love are sweet, little can compare with full immersion. That's so true. And what he means by that is, dipping into a book or watching a little bit of a movie, listening to some of a symphony is sweet, but there's nothing like fully immersing ourselves. Reading the whole book, listening to the whole symphony, watching the whole movie, and letting ourselves get immersed in it. What artists do, and I would perhaps add in a designator and say what great artists do, probably unconsciously, is destroy their notions of what is good enough again and again. That's something that could have been written by Cyril Connolly. Art should be taken as seriously as marriage, from the making of it to the meaning of it. As I age, I've been letting go of the impulse to rank. And I'm feeling that same thing, especially with things like star rating systems. They're so reductive that I'm kind of losing that too. I want to be more qualitative in my analysis and critiques rather than coldly quantitative. This is from a delightfully titled essay called Envy, the Unsuccessful Writer's Friend. When we envy, we empower ourselves, though it can be sand to hold and fire to touch. Like love, envy connects and repels, and those who serve it often don't know how much they cherish its invisible empire. He talks about Patrick White, he talks about Gertrude Stein, he talks about Rossellini. I've seen some criticisms given to this work that say that it is laden with stilted Britishisms. Now, I don't know if that's because they read the original version of See What I See that was published in the UK. So inevitably, I'm sure that the editor changed some things to appeal to the British audience. But this is actually an expanded version of the British original collection, which I have not read. I could see where maybe some overuse of the word ballyhoo or ballyhooed, which is kind of an antique word to my ear. And it does come up a lot across the essay collection. But we have to remember in cases like this, be careful with our criticisms and reducing the whole work to just a repetitive word like that. I think you'll find that in essay collections that have taken work across a number of years, inevitably there's going to be a word or a handful of words that the writer favors. But nonetheless, over the last few weeks, I was delighted to spend time trying to see the world and see works of art the way that Greg Gerke does. I hope you'll check this essay collection out.